The galaxy was quiet, too quiet, stared at her monitoring screens with tired eyes. She had been watching for 3 days straight, hoping to see something. Anything that showed resistance was still alive out there. But there was nothing. The Dominion had won. 8 cycles ago, they had arrived from beyond the galactic rim with ships that could pass through solid matter like ghosts. Their weapons did not destroy bodies. They destroyed minds. One blast from their neural cannons and entire crews would turn on each other, or simply stop thinking altogether. They had conquered world after world, species after species, until there was no one left to fight. People had been among the first to fall. Her crystalline body still showed cracks from the battle where her home fleet had been destroyed. She had escaped with a handful of others to this hidden station in the void between stars. They had spent years sending out distress calls to anyone who might listen. But one by one, those potential allies had gone silent too. The collective, machines that could repair themselves endlessly, had lasted 6 months. The ancient empire with 1,000 years of military tradition had fallen in 3 weeks. The swarm, billions of ships moving as one mind, had been turned against itself in a single day. Now there was only the Dominion. Their neural control networks covered every major world. Billions of beings went about their daily lives with dead eyes, their free will stripped away, serving masters who viewed them as nothing more than useful tools. Communications officer, a young named, spoke quietly. "Commander, we just received the final surrender code. The Outer Rim Coalition has fallen. They were the last." Felt something inside her crystalline chest crack a little more. The Outer Rim Coalition had been stubborn, independent worlds that valued freedom above all else. If they had surrendered, then it truly was over. "Shut down all distress beacons," said, her voice hollow. "There is no point anymore. No one is coming to help us." Began entering the shutdown commands. The station's power readings dropped as the powerful transmitters went offline one by one. 18 months of constant broadcasting, beaming messages of hope and desperation into the void, all for nothing. Then something strange appeared on the sensor display. "Commander," said, his voice suddenly sharp with surprise, "I am detecting faster-than-light signatures, 12 of them, large, very large." Move to his station quickly. Her fingers flew across the controls, bringing up detailed scans. 12 massive objects were dropping out of FTL travel at the edge of the mapped galaxy. They were huge, each one the size of a Dominion fortress ship. "Are they?" asked, though she already knew the answer. These signatures were wrong, different. "No, Commander. The energy patterns do not match anything in our database. The hull configurations are unknown. They are covered in heavy armor plating, but the design looks primitive, crude, even." Watched as the 12 ships formed up into a tight formation. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. Then her communications console lit up with an incoming transmission on an open channel. The language was Galactic Standard, but the accent was strange, clipped, and precise. "This is Admiral Menu of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress calls 18 months ago. We came as fast as we could. Where is the enemy?" For a long moment could not speak. Terran. She searched her memory crystals for that word. Terra. Earth. A small world on the far edge of the galaxy, barely noticed by the major powers. A species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel a few generations ago. Young, inexperienced, primitive by galactic standards. They had come. Looked at with wide eyes. "Commander, what do we tell them? They do not know. They do not know the war is already over." Activated the communication channel. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "This is Commander of the Free Resistance. Admiral Menu, you are too late. The galaxy has fallen. The Dominion controls everything. Every major civilization has surrendered. You should turn back before they find you." There was a pause. Then Admiral Menu's voice came back, and there was something in his tone that had not heard in years. determination. Commander, we traveled for 18 months to get here. We are not turning back. Transmit all tactical data on this Dominion. Ship types, weapon systems, deployment patterns, everything you have. We need to know what we are facing. Admiral, you do not understand, said, urgency creeping into her voice. The Dominion has weapons that can control minds. They can phase their ships through solid matter. They have enslaved billions. Every species that fought them lost within weeks. Your 12 ships cannot. 13, Minu interrupted. We left one carrier group back at the rally point, but I appreciate your concern, Commander. However, humanity did not come all this way to run away. Now, are you going to send us that tactical data, or do we go in blind? Looked at, who had pulled up images of the human ships on his display. They looked so basic compared to Dominion vessels. Angular metal hulls covered in armor plates. Weapons that appeared to be simple mass drivers and missile tubes. No visible shield generators. No phase shift technology. No neural protection that any known species had been able to develop. These humans would be slaughtered. But something in Admiral Minu's voice made hesitate. It was not arrogance. It was not ignorance. It was the voice of someone who had weighed the odds and decided to fight anyway. She had not heard that kind of voice since before the Dominion came. I will send you everything we have, finally said. But Admiral, please understand what you are facing. The Dominion does not just kill. They take away everything that makes you who you are. Death would be kinder. We understand, Commander, Minu replied. And we are still not leaving. Stand by. The Terran Defense Fleet is preparing for combat operations. Minu out. The channel closed, began compiling all the resistance data they had gathered over the years, battle reports, sensor logs, intelligence on Dominion tactics and technology. As she worked, she felt something she had thought was dead inside her. Hope. It was small and fragile, barely a flicker in the darkness. But it was there. 12 human ships against an empire that had conquered the galaxy. It was insane. It was impossible. But they had come. When everyone else had fallen, when the last lights of freedom had been extinguished, humanity had arrived and said they would not turn back. Finished the data transmission and watched the human fleet move deeper into Dominion space. She did not know if these humans would survive their first encounter with the. She did not know if they understood what they were facing. But for the first time in years, the galaxy was not completely silent. Someone was still willing to fight. And that changed everything. Admiral Minu stood in the command center of the TDF Indomitable, watching data streams flow across holographic displays. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently, analyzing the information that Commander had transmitted. The picture they were building was grim. Captain, his second-in-command, walked up beside him. She held a data tablet in her hands, but Minu could see from her expression that the news was not good. Admiral, I have completed the initial assessment, said. The Dominion's technology is far beyond what we expected. Their phase shift drives allow their ships to become intangible during combat. Conventional weapons pass right through them. Their neural weapons can take control of enemy crews in seconds. They have conquered 16 major civilizations in 8 years. Tell me about the neural weapons, Minu said, his eyes still on the displays showing Dominion patrol routes throughout the galaxy. Pulled up a tactical recording from one of the battles. An Empire battleship, massive and powerful, faced off against a single Dominion cruiser. The Dominion ship fired what looked like a wave of purple energy. It washed over the vessel, and within seconds, the battleship turned its weapons on its own escort ships. The weapon targets the nervous systems of organic beings, explained. It overrides free will and turns victims into puppets. Some species tried to use completely automated ships, but the Dominion had countermeasures for that too. Machine intelligence can be hacked. Biological crews can be controlled. No one found a defense that worked. Minu nodded slowly. Behind him, Engineer was studying the same data with her technical team. She was humanity's top weapons specialist, and if anyone could find a weakness in Dominion technology, it would be her. What about their phase shift capability? Minyu asked. It is their primary defensive system, said. When active, their ships exist partially outside normal space. Energy weapons are useless. Kinetic weapons pass through them without causing damage. They can only be hit during the brief moments when they phase back into normal space to fire their own weapons. How brief? 0.3 seconds on average. Minyu allowed himself a small smile. That is longer than you think, Captain. What is the status of the fleet? All ships report ready for combat operations. Marines are equipped and standing by. Our supply situation is stable for 60 days of operations, longer if we can secure resupply points. A communication officer spoke up from across the command center. Admiral, we have an incoming probe, Dominion design. It is scanning us. Let it, Minyu said calmly. Weapons hold, do not engage. The crew looked surprised, but they followed orders. On the main display, a small Dominion probe approached the Indomitable. It circled the ship slowly, its sensors active and probing. Then it moved closer, and something changed. The probe began broadcasting a different kind of energy signature. Neural weapon activating, said, her voice tense. All crew should feel the effects in 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. The bridge crew continued working normally. No one collapsed. No one turned violent. No one's eyes went blank and dead. The neural weapon washed over the ship like water off a duck's back. The probe's AI seemed confused. It broadcast the weapon again at higher power. Still nothing. The humans did not even seem to notice. Weapons free, Minyu said quietly. Destroy it. The Indomitable's point defense spun up and fired. Solid metal slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed, tore the probe into pieces. Debris scattered across space. Stared at the debris field. Admiral, the neural weapon had no effect on us. No effect at all. I know, Minyu said. Engineer, please join me on the command deck. Arrived a moment later, and Minyu gestured for her to explain what the entire crew was wondering. How had they survived a weapon that had brought down entire civilizations? Human neurology is different from most galactic species, said, pulling up a medical display. Our brains evolved behind something called a blood-brain barrier. It is a protective membrane that filters what can and cannot reach our neural tissue. The Dominion weapon works by sending specific frequencies directly into the nervous system, but our biology blocks it. Their weapon cannot reach our brains. So we are immune, asked. To their neural weapons, yes, but not to their other systems. Their phase shift technology and their standard weapons can still hurt us. Minyu nodded. Then we use what advantages we have. Commander, are you receiving this transmission? The communication channel opened, and his voice came through from her hidden station. Yes, Admiral, I saw what happened. The probe's weapon did not affect your crew. How is this possible? Biology, Minyu said simply. Commander, I need you to spread this information to every resistance cell in the galaxy. Humanity is immune to the Dominion's primary weapon. We are going to fight and we are going to win. But we cannot do it alone. We need the resistance to be ready to rise up when the time comes. There was a long pause, then spoke, and her voice carried an emotion that had been absent before. Admiral, if what you say is true, then the Dominion's greatest advantage is useless against you. But their ships can still phase through your weapons. How will you fight them? Smiled, it was not a kind smile. Our weapons do not rely on exotic physics or energy fields. We use kinetic energy, mass and velocity, old-fashioned destruction, and we have ways of dealing with targets that try to phase out of normal space. What ways? Asked. You will see soon enough, Minyu said. First, we need to test our tactics against actual Dominion forces. Commander, transmit the location of the nearest Dominion military installation. Admiral, the nearest installation is Station. It is a major refueling depot defended by 15 warships. It is considered one of their most secure facilities. Perfect, Minu said. We will hit it in 12 hours. Tell your people to watch. Tell them that the Dominion is not invincible. Tell them that humanity has arrived and we are not afraid. The channel closed. Minu turned to his crew. All ships battle stations. We are going in loud and hard. I want every Dominion sensor in this sector to know we are here. No stealth, no subtlety. We are going to send a message that will be heard across the entire galaxy. Move to her station. Admiral, going in without stealth means they will be ready for us. They will have overwhelming numbers. Good, Minu said. Let them bring everything they have. Are the dust canisters ready? Yes, Admiral. All ships are loaded and ready to deploy. Excellent, Captain. Set course for station. Maximum speed. It is time to show the Dominion what humans do when someone tries to take away freedom. The Indomitable's engines powered up, and the massive ship began moving. Around it, the rest of the Terran fleet formed up in attack formation. They were crude ships by galactic standards, covered in heavy armor and bristling with simple but effective weapons. They did not have phase shift drives or neural control networks or any of the exotic technologies that had allowed the Dominion to conquer the galaxy. But they had something the galaxy had forgotten. They had humans who were angry, determined, and absolutely unwilling to surrender. Humans who had spent their entire history fighting each other and had learned every dirty trick, every tactical innovation, every hard lesson that came from thousands of years of warfare. The Dominion had conquered civilizations that relied on their advanced technology to win. They had never faced an enemy that was immune to their neural weapons. They had never fought a species that approached war with the brutal efficiency that humans had refined over. They were about to learn. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward station, Minu looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Commander was spreading the word to the resistance. Somewhere out there, billions of enslaved beings were hearing that someone was finally fighting back. 12 human ships against an empire. The odds were terrible. The chances of success were slim. Most of the crew knew they might not survive the next 24 hours. But not one of them had hesitated when orders were given. Not one of them had suggested turning back. They had come to help, and they would see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. Minu allowed himself one moment of doubt, one brief acknowledgement of how insane this plan was. Then he pushed it aside and focused on the battle ahead. The Dominion had conquered the galaxy through fear and overwhelming power. Humanity was about to teach them about fear. Captain sat in the command chair of the TDF Relentless, watching the countdown timer tick toward 0. Around his destroyer, the other ships of the Terran fleet held formation, their weapons systems powered up and ready. Ahead of them, Station hung in orbit around a massive gas giant, its lights glowing like a jewel against the swirling clouds below. Contact in 30 seconds, his tactical officer reported. Dominion sensors have detected us. They are powering up weapons and launching fighters. Nodded, this was it. The first real battle between humanity and the Dominion. Everything they had planned, all the strategies they had developed during the long journey here, would be put to the test in the next few minutes. All ships maintain formation. Admiral Minu's voice came through the fleet channel. Wait for my mark before deploying countermeasures. Let them think we are easy prey. 15 Dominion warships moved away from the station, forming a defensive screen. They were sleek vessels, smooth and elegant compared to the angular human ships. Their hulls seemed to shimmer as their phase shift drives activated, making them flicker in and out of normal space. Dominion commander watched the approaching human fleet with amusement. These crude ships had appeared out of nowhere, broadcasting aggressive intent and moving directly toward one of the Dominion's most important facilities. It was either incredible bravery or incredible stupidity, or suspected it was the latter. "Prepare neural weapons," he ordered. "One blast should be sufficient to take control of their crews. Then we can examine their technology at our leisure." The Dominion ships moved into optimal firing positions. Their neural cannons charged up, the distinctive purple glow building around their weapon ports. Then they fired, releasing waves of neural energy that washed over the human fleet. Nothing happened. The human ships continued their approach, steady and unaffected, or stared at his displays in confusion. The neural weapons had fired correctly. The energy readings showed full power, but the human crews were not responding. They were not turning on each other. They were not going blank and dead. They were acting like nothing had happened. "Fire again," or ordered, "maximum power." The neural cannons fired a second time, pouring even more energy into the attack. The purple waves engulfed the human ships completely, and still nothing happened. On the Relentless allowed himself a small smile. "Looks like they are confused. All ships begin attack run. Target their weapon systems first." The human fleet accelerated, and there opened fire. Solid metal slugs, accelerated to incredible speeds, crossed the distance to the Dominion ships in seconds. But the Dominion vessels had activated their phase shift drives, and the slugs passed harmlessly through their translucent hulls. Or felt his confidence return. "Foolish humans, their weapons cannot touch us. Return fire with standard weapons, destroy them." The Dominion ships phased back into normal space just long enough to fire their energy cannons. Bright beams of concentrated power struck the human ships and several took damage. Armor plating melted. Hull breaches appeared, but the human ships kept coming. "Now," Admiral Menu said calmly, "deploy the dust." Every human ship released clouds of metallic particles from special canisters. The particles spread out rapidly, filling the space around the battlefield. They were tiny, almost microscopic, but there were billions of them, creating a dense field of suspended matter. Or saw the dust spreading but did not understand its purpose. "What are they doing? Some kind of sensor jamming." "Unknown, Commander," his science officer replied. "The particles are inert, they pose no threat." But then one of the Dominion ships phased back into normal space to fire its weapons, and the particles were already there. When matter tried to occupy the same space as other matter, the results were catastrophic. The Dominion ship tore apart from the inside as thousands of tiny particles collided with its hull and internal systems. Explosions rippled through the vessel as its reactor went critical. Two more Dominion ships phased back in different locations and met the same fate. They materialized inside clouds of metallic dust and were ripped apart by the collisions, or suddenly understood. The humans had found a way to weaponize the phase shift technology against them. "All ships cease phasing," or ordered desperately. "Maintain normal space. Focus fire on the lead human vessel." But without their phase shift capability, the Dominion ships were vulnerable. The human fired again, and this time the solid slugs found their marks. Metal projectiles smashed through Dominion shields and armor, punching holes in hulls and destroying weapon systems. "They are fighting like barbarians," or said in disbelief. "No finesse, no advanced tactics, just brutal, overwhelming force." "It is working, Commander," his tactical officer replied grimly. Watch 3 more Dominion ships break apart under sustained fire. "Marines, prepare for boarding action. We need to take that station intact." Lieutenant stood in the deployment bay of the Relentless, surrounded by 200 Marines in heavy armor. They carried simple but effective weapons: assault rifles, breaching charges, and portable shields. No exotic technology, just proven tools of war. "Listen up," said to her troops. "We go in hard and fast. The station's crew is probably enslaved by neural control, so use non-lethal methods when possible. Our job is to free them, not kill them. But if you encounter actual Dominion soldiers, show no mercy. They chose to be part of this. Clear. Yes, ma'am, the Marines replied in unison. The boarding pods launched from the relentless, accelerating toward station. Dominion point defense weapons tried to shoot them down, but the human ships provided covering fire, destroying the defensive turrets one by one. The pods slammed into the station's hull, and shaped charges blew open access points. Was first through the breach, her rifle up and ready. She found herself in a cargo bay filled with enslaved workers, their eyes blank and dead as they continued loading supplies despite the battle raging outside. It was heartbreaking to see, but there was no time for sympathy yet. Second squad, secure those civilians and move them to safe zones. First and third squads with me. We are taking the command center. The Marines moved through the station with practiced efficiency. They had trained for years in shipboarding operations, and the layout of station was similar enough to human designs that they could navigate effectively. When they encountered enslaved security forces, they used stun weapons to incapacitate rather than kill. But when they found actual Dominion officers, the response was swift and lethal. Outside, the battle was turning decisively in humanity's favor. Captain coordinated the fleet's fire, focusing on one Dominion ship at a time and destroying it completely before moving to the next target. It was methodical, brutal, and effective. The Dominion had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Orr's ship took a direct hit from a missile salvo, and his bridge erupted in flames. As he crawled from the wreckage, his last transmission went out to all Dominion forces in the sector. The humans are immune to neural weapons. Their tactics are unlike anything we have encountered. Send reinforcements. Send everything. But by the time that message reached Dominion Command, it was already too late for station. Kicked open the door to the command center and found 3 Dominion officers trying to destroy the station's computer systems. Her Marines cut them down with precise fire. Within minutes, the station's neural control network was shut down, and the enslaved workers began to wake up, confusion and horror on their faces as they realized what had been done to them. Station secure, reported to Admiral Menu. We have control of all major systems. Casualties are light, requesting medical teams for the freed prisoners. Acknowledged, Lieutenant, Menu replied. Well done. All ships cease fire. The battle is over. The surviving Dominion ships, only 4 out of the original 15, retreated at maximum speed. Behind them, station was now in human hands, and the space around it was filled with the wreckage of Dominion vessels. On her hidden monitoring station, watched the battle recordings with her entire crew gathered around. They played the footage again and again, hardly believing what they were seeing. A Dominion facility, thought to be impregnable, had fallen in less than 6 hours to a force of human ships. Send this recording to every resistance cell in the galaxy, ordered, her voice shaking with emotion. Tell them what we have witnessed. Tell them the Dominion can be beaten. Tell them that humanity has shown us how. Across the galaxy, enslaved beings watched the recordings in secret. They saw human ships fighting without fear. They saw Dominion vessels destroyed by simple tactics and brutal efficiency. They saw the impossible happen. And for the first time in 8 years, they began to believe that freedom might be possible again. Admiral Menu stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display showing station and the debris field around it. It had been a good first battle, but he knew it was only the beginning. All ships begin repairs and resupply operations, he ordered. We have work to do. The Emperor sat on his throne at the center of the galaxy, watching reports flood in from across his empire. For the first time in his reign, he felt something he had not experienced in years: concern. The human fleet had struck 17 more targets in the past month. Supply depots, patrol stations, and refueling points had all fallen to their relentless attacks. Worse, the enslaved populations were beginning to resist. Small acts of sabotage at first, then larger rebellions. The neural control networks that kept billions in line were being destroyed by resistance fighters who suddenly had hope. Send the third and seventh battle fleets to intercept the humans, the Emperor ordered. I want them destroyed, all of them. But Admiral Minu had no intention of being found until he was ready. The human fleet moved through space using routes that the resistance had mapped out over years of hiding. They struck quickly, destroyed their targets, and vanished before Dominion reinforcements could arrive. It was guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, and the Dominion had no experience dealing with it. In a command meeting aboard the Indomitable, Minu gathered his senior officers and commander, who had joined the fleet 3 weeks earlier. The resistance reports are encouraging, Captain said, displaying a tactical map of the galaxy. 50 worlds are in active rebellion. The Dominion is spreading its forces thin, trying to maintain control. That was the plan, Minu said, but now we need to deliver the final blow. Tell us about the throne world's defenses. Crystalline form flickered as she pulled up detailed scans. The throne world sits at the galactic core, surrounded by 300 Dominion warships. The planetary defense grid is powered by the neural energy of billions of enslaved minds. It is the most heavily defended location in known space. Every military strategist agrees that a direct assault would be suicide. Good thing we are not military strategists, Minu said with a slight smile. We are humans who are very good at doing impossible things. What about the neural control network's central hub? It is located deep beneath the planet's surface, said. The hub is biological, grown from living tissue. Destroying it would free every enslaved mind on the planet, but it would also likely kill thousands of beings whose consciousness is directly wired into the system. The room fell silent. Engineer spoke up quietly. If we do nothing, billions remain enslaved. If we destroy the hub, thousands die but billions go free. The mathematics are clear, but the moral cost is high. We will cross that bridge when we reach it, Minu said. First, we need to get past 300 warships. Here is what we are going to do. Over the next hour, Minu laid out a plan that made even his experienced officers nervous. It relied on perfect timing, coordination with resistance forces across multiple sectors, and an assumption that the Dominion would respond exactly as predicted. If any single element failed, the entire fleet would be destroyed. This is insane, Captain said, but there was a hint of admiration in her voice. When do we begin? 48 hours, Minu said. Send the signal to all resistance cells. Tell them to rise up simultaneously. Every world, every station, every facility. The Dominion will have to divide its forces to respond. That is when we strike the throne world. 48 hours later, the galaxy erupted in coordinated rebellion. On 12 sectors spanning thousands of light years, enslaved populations rose up against their masters. Resistance fighters sabotaged neural control facilities, disabled Dominion ships, and broadcast messages of defiance. The Dominion, which had ruled through fear and absolute control, suddenly found itself fighting on dozens of fronts at once. Fleet Captain commanded the TDF Resolute as it led the main attack force toward the throne world. Around his ship, the entire Terran fleet moved in tight formation, their hulls from a month of constant combat, but their crews ready for one final battle. Contact in 10 seconds, tactical officer reported. Dominion fleet is forming defensive positions around the planet. I count 283 ships. Some must have been pulled away to deal with the rebellions. Still more than enough to destroy us, muttered. But that is why we brought friends. Behind the human fleet, dozens of resistance ships appeared. They were a ragtag collection of vessels from every species the Dominion had conquered, repaired and armed over months of secret preparation. They did not have the firepower of Dominion ships, but they had something more important. They had courage and determination. The Dominion fleet opened fire first, and space filled with energy beams and missile trails. The human ships took heavy damage immediately. The Resolute's shields collapsed under sustained fire, and hull breaches appeared across multiple decks. But the ship kept moving forward, its hammering away at Dominion targets. Engineer worked frantically in the Indomitable's engineering section, rerouting power and keeping weapons systems online as damage reports flooded in. "We cannot sustain this rate of fire for long," she reported to Admiral Menu. "Reactors are at 130% capacity." "They do not need to last long," Menu replied calmly. "Just long enough. Lieutenant, are your teams ready?" On a fast attack transport, Lieutenant checked his equipment one final time. Around him, 50 commandos did the same. They were the best soldiers humanity had, trained for the most dangerous missions. Today they would attempt something that would either end the war or get them all killed. "Ready, Admiral," reported. "Launch when ready." "Godspeed, Lieutenant," Menu said. "The fate of billions rests on your shoulders." The transport launched from the Indomitable, using the chaos of the battle to slip past the Dominion fleet. It dove toward the throne world's atmosphere, protected by the covering fire of human and resistance ships. Dominion fighters tried to intercept, but they were driven off by human interceptors that fought with reckless abandon. The transport crashed through clouds and descended toward the coordinates had provided. The neural control hub was located beneath a massive fortress complex in the northern hemisphere. Getting to it would require fighting through thousands of enslaved guards and heavily armed Dominion soldiers. His team hit the ground running. They breached the outer walls using shaped charges and pushed into the fortress. The enslaved guards attacked with blank expressions, following programming that forced them to defend their masters. His team used stun weapons when possible, but there were so many guards that they had to fight their way forward meter by bloody meter. In space, the battle was reaching a critical point. Fleet Captain watched his ship systems fail one by one. The Resolute was dying, torn apart by focused Dominion fire, but it had bought time for the other ships to press the attack. "All hands abandon ship," ordered. "Get to the escape pods, move." The crew evacuated as the Resolute's hull collapsed, stayed at his post, manually targeting the weapons until the very last moment. He fired one final salvo at a Dominion battleship, then ran for the nearest escape pod as the bridge exploded around him. Deep beneath the fortress, reached the neural control hub chamber. It was a horrific sight. The hub was indeed biological, a massive structure of living tissue and neural connections. Thousands of beings were wired directly into it, their bodies suspended in fluid while their minds powered the control network. Who had accompanied the team approached the hub with reverence and horror. "My people built this under Dominion orders," she said quietly. "We did not want to, but we had no choice. Now we have the chance to destroy it." Looked at the suspended beings, their faces locked in expressions of endless agony. "If we destroy this, they die, all of them." "We are already dead inside," a weak voice said. One of the suspended beings had somehow maintained partial consciousness. "We feel everything. Every enslaved mind in the network, we feel their suffering. Please, end it. Give them freedom, even if we must pay the price." Looked at his team, then she was crying, crystalline tears running down her face. "Do it," she said. "It is what they would want, what we all want. Freedom, no matter the cost." "Set the charges." His hands shook as he armed them. This was not the clean combat he had trained for. This was making impossible choices that would haunt him forever, but it had to be done. "Charges set," he reported to Admiral Menu, requesting permission to detonate. In space, Menu looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was destroyed or disabled. The Dominion still had over 100 ships, but if succeeded, none of that would matter. "Permission granted," Menu said quietly. "May we be forgiven for what we are about to do." "Hit the detonator." Deep beneath the fortress, the charges exploded and the neural control hub was destroyed in an instant. The beings wired into it died quickly, their suffering finally ended. And across the planet, billions of minds suddenly snapped free from control. The enslaved workers stopped moving. The programmed soldiers lowered their weapons. For the first time in years, they could think their own thoughts, feel their own emotions, make their own choices. The planetary defense grid powered down. The Dominion fleet, which had relied on enslaved crews for support functions, began experiencing malfunctions. The tide of battle shifted. Admiral Menu saw his opportunity. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessels, take them down. The human and resistance ships pressed their attack with renewed vigor. Without the support of the neural network, the Dominion fleet began to crumble. Ships that had relied on enslaved engineering crews found their systems failing. Commanders who had used neural control to maintain discipline watched their crews wake up and realize what they had been forced to do. By nightfall, the throne world had fallen. The emperor was captured as he tried to flee. The Dominion fleet surrendered. The throne room of the emperor was no longer a place of power. It had been converted into a courtroom where representatives from every conquered species gathered to witness justice. Emperor stood in chains, his arrogance finally broken, as the charges against him were read aloud. Commander stood among the witnesses, watching the being who had enslaved her people face judgment. She felt no satisfaction, only a profound weariness. Victory had come at a terrible cost. Thousands of human ships lay destroyed. Millions had died in the rebellions across the galaxy. And in the neural control hub beneath the fortress, thousands of innocent beings had sacrificed their lives for freedom. Admiral Menu sat in the observers section, his uniform showing the signs of weeks of continuous combat. Captain was beside him, one arm in a sling from injuries sustained when the bridge of the Indomitable had taken a direct hit during the final battle. Around them, survivors from the Terran fleet filled the seats, their faces showing exhaustion and grief for fallen comrades. The tribunal's lead judge, a elder who had been freed from neural control, spoke in a voice that carried throughout the chamber. Emperor, you stand accused of crimes against billions of sentient beings. Enslavement, genocide, the destruction of free will itself. How do you plead? And said nothing. He simply stared at the floor, knowing that no words could save him now. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses came forward, freed from years of enslavement, and told their stories. Herself about watching her home fleet destroyed and her people subjugated. A machine intelligence, its programming freed from Dominion control, explained how it had been forced to turn on its own creators. A soldier described fighting against his own children while trapped inside his own mind, screaming silently but unable to stop his body from following orders. When the testimonies were complete, the tribunal delivered its verdict swiftly. Emperor N and his leadership were found guilty on all counts. They would spend the rest of their lives in isolation, their own minds intact but their freedom gone forever. It seemed fitting that beings who had stolen free will from others would lose their own. As the former emperor was led away, Admiral Menu stepped forward to address the assembled representatives. The room fell silent. These people had suffered under Dominion rule for years. They had watched their families enslaved and their worlds conquered. And then humans had arrived from nowhere, immune to the weapons that had defeated everyone else, and fought a war that seemed impossible to win. I am not good at speeches, Menu said honestly. I am a soldier, not a diplomat, but I want to say something that I think you all need to hear. Humanity did not come here to conquer. We did not come here to replace one empire with another. We came because 18 months ago, we received a distress call from people who were still fighting for freedom. We came because when someone asks for help, you answer if you can. He paused, looking around the room at beings from dozens of different species. The Dominion fell because they made a mistake. They relied on technology that made them feel invincible. They forgot that the most important weapon any being has is the will to remain free. That will cannot be taken away by neural weapons or phase shift drives or overwhelming force. It can only be surrendered, and you never surrendered. Not really. You kept fighting in whatever ways you could, and that made all the difference. Stepped forward to stand beside Minu. Admiral Minu is right. Humanity showed us that the Dominion could be beaten, but we won this war together. Every species that rose up in rebellion, every resistance fighter who sabotaged Dominion facilities, every enslaved worker who found the strength to resist even for a moment. You all contributed to this victory. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began the long process of healing. The neural control networks were systematically destroyed on every world. Dominion technology was deactivated and studied to prevent it from ever being used again. The enslaved populations, billions of beings, woke up to freedom, but also to the trauma of remembering everything they had been forced to do. Captain coordinated with engineers from other species to share human technology, not weapons, but tools for rebuilding, agricultural systems to feed populations that had been forced to work until exhaustion, medical knowledge to help treat the psychological damage of enslavement, infrastructure designs for worlds that had been stripped of resources by Dominion occupation. This is what we should have been doing all along, an engineer said as she studied human irrigation designs. Helping each other, sharing knowledge. The Dominion made us forget that cooperation is stronger than domination. Lieutenant worked with former Dominion slave soldiers, helping them process what had been done to them. Many had been forced to commit terrible acts while enslaved. They remembered every moment but had been powerless to stop themselves. The guilt was crushing. What you did under control was not your fault, told a young warrior who could barely look at her. You were victims, not criminals. The path forward is not easy, but it exists. You can choose who you want to be from this day forward. Engineer found herself teaching other species scientists about human engineering philosophy. They were fascinated by how humans approached problems without relying on exotic physics or advanced alien technology. We built everything ourselves from the ground up, explained to a group of researchers. When we encountered a problem, we could not wait for someone to give us a solution. We had to figure it out. That made our technology simpler but also more reliable. You do not need to be the most advanced civilization to be effective. You just need to understand your tools and use them well. 6 months after the liberation, the first Galactic Assembly convened on a neutral world. Every species sent representatives. For the first time in recorded history, there would be no empires, no conquered peoples, no master races. Every civilization would have an equal voice. Attended as the representative of the people, she watched as species that had been enemies under Dominion rule now sat together and talked about cooperation instead of conquest. It was not perfect. There were still disputes and disagreements, but they were resolved through discussion, not force. Admiral Minu stood to address the assembly, and the room quieted immediately. He had become a legend across the galaxy, the human who had led the impossible fight against the Dominion. This assembly represents something important, Minu said. Not because humanity made it possible, but because you all chose to make it possible. The Dominion enslaved you, but it could not destroy your desire for freedom. That desire survived years of oppression and is now building something better than what existed before. He looked around the room, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. Humanity will stay for as long as we are needed to help with rebuilding. But this is your galaxy, not ours. We are just visitors who answered a call for help. When the work is done, we will return to Earth and watch from afar as you build your own future. A representative stood up. Admiral Minu, humanity's help has been invaluable, but we would ask that you do not go entirely. The galaxy is better with you in it. Please stay as partners, not conquerors. Stay as friends. Minu looked at Captain, who nodded slightly. If that is what you wish, Minu said, we will stay, but as equals among equals, nothing more. The Assembly voted unanimously to welcome humanity as full members of the galactic community. Trade agreements were drafted. Cultural exchanges were planned. Scientific collaborations began. 1 year after the liberation, Admiral Minu stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, preparing for the long journey back to Earth. Most of the Terran fleet would remain as part of the new Galactic Defense Force, but Minu and a small group of ships would return home to report and bring back news of what had happened. Commander came to see him off. Her crystalline form had healed, the cracks from the old battles finally sealed. She looked healthier than she had in years. "Thank you, Admiral," she said simply. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Minu smiled. "We could not have done it without you and the Resistance. You kept hope alive when everything seemed lost. That was harder than anything we did." "Will you come back?" asked. "Eventually," Minu said. "Earth needs to know what happened here. My people need to understand that we are not alone in the universe, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is help others who need it." The Indomitable prepared to depart. As it turned toward Earth, Minu looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought them here. 18 months of travel to answer a distress call. Months of brutal combat against an empire that seemed unbeatable. The loss of good people who had believed in the mission enough to die for it. But they had succeeded. The galaxy was free. Billions of beings could now choose their own destiny. It had been worth every sacrifice. Lieutenant, by the choice he had made in the neural control hub, stood beside Minu. "Admiral, was it right, what we did to win this war?" Minu considered the question carefully. "I do not know if it was right, Lieutenant. I know it was necessary. Those beings in the hub asked us to free the galaxy even if it cost their lives. We honored their choice. Now we have to live with that choice and make sure their sacrifice meant something." The Indomitable jumped to faster-than-light speed, beginning the long journey home. Behind them, the galaxy continued to heal and rebuild. The Dominion was gone, destroyed not by superior technology, but by the simple refusal of free beings to remain enslaved. Humanity had arrived when the galaxy needed them most. They had fought when everyone else had surrendered. They had shown that no enemy was truly invincible if you were willing to stand up and fight. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy the most important lesson of all, that freedom is worth any cost, and that no one should ever have to face tyranny alone. When someone calls for help, you answer. When someone needs you, you show up. That was what it meant to be human. That was what it would always mean, no matter how far they traveled among the stars. The galaxy had fallen into darkness. Humanity had helped light it up again. And together, all the species of the galaxy would make sure that darkness never returned.